What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to do a full story video. A full story video is when I sit down and take a bunch of videos that tell one overarching story and combine them together into one big video. Now, today's full story video is going to be about X Factor and their part in Fatal Attractions. You see, when it came to Fatal Attractions, it was supposed to be this massive crossover with all the different X teams, X-Men, X Factor, X Force, Excalibur, and even Wolverine's book as well. But when it came to X Factor and their chapter in Fatal Attractions, it was kind of like their own adventure because they did not really cross over with the other X titles like Excalibur or X Force. They were on their own, handling their own kind of situation. And so it made sense to me to go ahead and do a full story video that only focuses on X Factor and their time in Fatal Attractions. Now, the first few chapters of this video is going to lead into their chapter of Fatal Attractions, and then we get one more video after it that kind of shows the aftermath of what they went through when it came to their part in Fatal Attractions. Either way, I do hope you enjoy today's comic book video. What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we are going to continue our coverage over the X-Men. Now, real quick, guys, my voice is somewhat gone, so my voice may sound a tad bit different. And guys, I'm sorry, but hey, I have to keep making these videos because you guys love the X-Men coverage so much. Now, with that being said, when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men, we are officially done with the Executioner song. So now it's time for us to work our way up to the next crossover, and that would be Fatal Attractions. Now, when it comes to our coverage, we have to jump back over to X Factor first. And the reason why, because the first chapter we're going to talk about today is really more of X Factor going to a therapy session. Oh, by the way, we're going to cover 3 issues, X Factor 87, 88, and 89. Now, technically, each of those books are kind of like a one-shot, but I want to go ahead and cover all 3 books because I kind of want to pick up the pace when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. And so when it comes to issue number 87, like I said, it's the X Factor team going to therapy because these guys have gone through a lot in a very short period of time, especially with the idea of, well, the extension agenda, the Executioner song, and things happening between those events. And really, for some characters, they had gone through things before those 2 events as well. And so it's kind of about time for our heroes to sit down and go through an actual therapy session to kind of figure out what is actually going on in their minds. Now, the first character to kind of go through the actual therapy session would be Wolfbane. Now, for Wolfbane, she has gone through a lot in a very short period of time because remember, when it came to the extension agenda, she was actually kidnapped by Genosha and they turned her into a slave. Now, when she had actually went through the entire process of becoming a slave for that country alone, well, it kind of changed how her powers actually worked. You see, for Wolfbane, she was able to turn herself into, well, a wolf, and then being able to turn back into a regular human. But now she's kind of stuck in this between phase where she's a girl form, but also a wolf at the same time, kind of like a werewolf, basically. But either way, ever since that happened to her, she kind of been acting a tad bit different. Like, for example, she's been very protective over the character Havoc. And so you have the therapist kind of trying to see what's going on in her mind. Now, we also do learn that she's been having some kind of weird dreams where every single time she watched a TV show, she kind of imagined herself being in that actual show. Now, for the therapist, we're not going to learn who it is until the end of this chapter, but he kind of realized that for Wolfbane, every single time she watches one of those movies and she has a dream about that movie or being part of that movie or TV show, it's really her trying to figure out who she is as a person, trying to get an idea of her own personality. Now, after he was able to work through that idea, he kind of realized that she has feelings for Havoc because growing up for Wolfbane, she had a horrible father. Now, unfortunately, we're not going to learn the actual origin of Wolfbane until down the road in later books. Just know that she had a father that was a reverend, but the whole guy said, like, hey, you know what? You are a mutant, you are a devil child, and began to treat her differently. And so, after she was able to get away from him, she began to meet other men in her life who were different, who actually cared for her. Charles Xavier, some on the New Mutants are X-Men, including X Factor like Havoc. And so for the therapist, he kind of realized that maybe Wolfbane has feelings for Havoc, like she wants to be with him because she is a teenager. She's still growing up as a child. Now, the next character we have to talk about would be Quicksilver. Now, for me personally, when it comes to the character Quicksilver, he wasn't really an X-Men character until the 1990s. Let me explain before y'all freak out here. You see, he did first appear over in X-Men comics, but after that, he was more an Avenger character for a good while. And then after that, they kind of pushed him over to, well, X-Men comics again. He joined X Factor. And that's why I say that the early days of Quicksilver is more of like he was an X-Men character, but for a good while, he was more an Avenger character rather than an X-Men character. Either way, by this point, he is officially an X-Men character. But when it comes to Quicksilver, we do learn that this therapy session is really more of kind of learning why he is such a jerk. Because to most people around him, he's impatient, he's a jerk, he's arrogant. But you have him explain why he is like that. Because for Quicksilver, the world around him is just moving too slow because he has super speed. And with that super speed, his mind, his body is always moving at a faster rate than what the world is. And so for him, it's kind of hard to be this patient person, to be this, less arrogant person because he gets bored very easily. He gets impatient very easily because things around him just move too slow. It's a way to remind us that with someone like him having super speed, his mind and body is at a faster rate than what we are as regular humans. Now, the next character we have to talk about would be Polaris. Now, Polaris, for me personally, had gone through a lot when it came to X-Men comics around this time. Because remember, when it came to Polaris, her body was actually possessed by another character known as Malice. Now, for Malice, she was part of the Marauders who worked for Mr. Sinister. Now, we were not technically told completely why Malice was assigned the job to take over the body of Polaris, but she did. And so for a good while there, Polaris was a bad guy, but not really because she was not in control of her own body. But then right after you have Polaris being able to regain control of her body, she had met a character known as Zaladane. Now, Zaladane kind of teased this idea that she was the long lost sister of Polaris, but that was never officially answered by Marvel Comics. And really, it's a character that has not been seen in a very long time in Marvel Comics. But either way, when it came to Polaris, she also gained secondary abilities like being able to grow in size and also super strength. Now, for Polaris, her main problem right now in this therapy session is the whole idea that she's kind of worried how other people look at her. And this, for me personally, is a callback to what happened to her when it came to her body being controlled by Malice. Because then to the world, or with other people, she was a bad guy. But in reality, she wasn't because she was being controlled by another person. But at the same time, she hates having therapy because a therapist has to go into your mind. And it's somebody else who has now accessed her mind like Malice did when she took over Polaris' body. And so for Polaris, this whole entire session is not going the way that the therapist thought it would. But at the same time, he's here to actually help her. But now we have to shift our focus over to the character known as Strong Guy. Now for Strong Guy, you had Marvel begin to kind of focus on his character a whole lot more around this time in Marvel Comics, because when it came to Chris Claremont, he was kind of like a background character, but you knew that Chris wanted to do more with the actual character. But when he joined X Factor, it was kind of like, okay, let's push him forward. Let's go ahead and explain more of the origin of this actual character. Now, for Strong Guy, we do learn that he has a huge problem when it comes to his powers. Real quick, when it comes to Strong Guy, his powers are more kinetic, meaning that he is able to absorb kinetic energy. When he does, he becomes well stronger. The problem is there is a limit to how much power he can absorb. And then sooner or later, he has to find a way to release that actual energy. But the reason why I'm bringing that up, because we have to go back to his childhood. You see, for Strong Guy, he was kind of labeled as a nerd. And the reason why, because he was able to, achieve greatness in the classroom when it came to his academics. But the problem was, though, he wanted to fit in. And so he thought the best way to do that was to, well, be a class clown. And so he was trying to be a smart guy, but also be a class clown. But the problem is, no matter what he did, he was never truly accepted. Now, there was a girl he had a crush on, but she did not really like him like that. She liked, well, his bullies. And so it got to the point where one day he was being bullied by all his bullies at once, and a school bus had hit him. And when a school bus had hit him, that was when his powers had officially manifested. And like I said, he absorbs kinetic energy. And so when that bus hit him, well, his body grew in so many different ways that it freaked out everyone there. Now, once you have Strong Guy over the years learn how to control his powers, we do learn that unfortunately, because of his powers, he is always in a constant pain. Like this man's whole entire body is just in pain no matter what, thanks to his abilities. But no one knows that because Strong Guy hides it. He tries his best to hide the idea that he's in pain because he does not want anybody else really worrying about him. Now, for Jamie Maddox, it's kind of different from everybody else. And what I mean by that is you kind of tell that for Peter David, he kind of knew what to do with this character, but he also knew that he did not need to actually carry out a whole 3 or 4 or 5 pages to explain what's going on in the mind of Jamie. You see, we do learn that the reason why he's the way he is because he has an actual fear of being alone because his whole entire life. And so for Jamie, it kind of makes sense because he is always making clones of himself. And those clones kind of help him be able to overcome that fear that he has when it comes to feeling like he may end up alone one day. And so with that right there, it's just Peter David saying, hey, listen, just real quick, here's Jamie, and let's go ahead and move on. Now, I want to move over to Valerie Cooper. And really, before we jump into Val Cooper, I forgot about Havoc. Now, for me, Havoc, this is really major for his character. And let me explain. So for me personally, when it came to the X-Men, they were not really that popular in the 1960s, as we all know. They got canceled. Now, for me personally, when it comes to Havoc and Polaris, they were kind of brought in to hopefully change up the X-Men, to kind of bring some fans into the actual book. As we all know, it didn't work out. But for the character Havoc, when it came to giant size X-Men, him and the rest of the old X-Men were kind of pushed out. But for Havoc and Polaris, they were really pushed out to the point where they were kind of like background characters until the 1980s, the late 80s, where you had Chris Claremont begin to bring those characters back in, putting Havoc back on the X-Men. Now, with Havoc now being the leader of the X-Factor team is a huge change for the character because now he is a leader. But that goes into his fear, the whole idea that everyone is comparing him to his brother, Scott Summers, because he hates the idea that Scott is a perfect leader, and he's kind of wondering if he'll be able to live up to his brother's standards. But now getting over to Val Cooper, we learned that she was the one who had actually called in the therapist to kind of help out the team out after everything they'd gone through in a very short period of time. But for Val Cooper, it kind of shows that she does not really know her team because once you had the therapist begin to ask Val, like, hey, what do you think about each person on the team? She says complete opposite of every single person on the team. And so it kind of shows that no, she has no idea what her team is like or who they are. And she needs to if she wants to be the leader of the actual team. But either way, you didn't have Val walk out of the room. But as she leaves the actual office of the therapist, we do see that something happens to her. Like a bunch of tentacles appear out of nowhere. They grab her and pull her away. And so we're kind of left to wonder what in the world just happened to Val Cooper. Now, we do learn that who was the actual therapist for X Factor. It was Doc Samson, who's really well known more in Hulk comics, but it does make sense that he'll be the therapist for X Factor. But now we have to jump over to X Factor issue number 88. Now, the opening pages of this book is introducing a new character. Now, this character, at first, we're not going to know a lot about the actual character, but later on, we're going to learn more about him. You see, when it comes to Random, he has the mutant ability to adapt to other mutant powers, meaning that if you try to use your powers against him, his body is going to change to counterattack against your own power to basically help him defeat you. Now, for Random, like I said earlier, down the road in other books when it comes to X Factor, we are going to learn more about the actual character, especially when it comes to a character known as Dark Beast. Now, for Random, he's right now arriving to a situation where he was called in to deal with the Ex-Patriots. Now, the Ex-Patriots are actually a group of characters that we have talked about before. You see, the Ex-Patriots were actually a group of mutants from Genosha. Now, remember, when it came to the late 1980s for Marvel Comics, we were introduced to Genosha. The problem was the country was lying to the entire world about the whole idea that they were paradise. But in reality, paradise was only for the humans. But if you were a mutant, you were a slave. And so for the Ex-Patriots, they were a group of mutants that were slaves on Genosha. They had left Genosha to hope to find a better home to live in. Now, they had no idea that shortly after they had left the country, that Genosha had actually became a better place for both mutants and humans. They're right now trying to live in harmony. Now, when it came to the Ex-Patriots, the last time we had talked about them, they were kind of being able to walk around New York to see what America was like. Unfortunately, one of the mutants known as Taylor, he ran into a group of humans who, hates mutants. And so they beat him down and he was severely injured. And so with his injuries, you had X Factor trying their best to kind of help take care of him, but you didn't have the Ex-Patriots sneak away from X Factor while you had X Factor, the X-Men, X-Force working together to fight against Strife over in the Executioner song. And so they took over a hospital and they are demanding that people actually help out Taylor. And so that is why Random was called, because he deals with these kind of situations. Now that leads into X Factor arriving at the situation. Now, by the time they get there, Random had already taken down the Ex-Patriots because, like I said earlier, when it comes to his mutant powers, he is able to adapt to all kinds of situations when it comes to other mutant abilities. So for Random, when it comes to him fighting against X Factor, it's the same thing all over again. They try their best to use their different kinds of abilities to hopefully take him down. But the problem is that the dude is able to adapt to all kinds of situations when it comes to other mutant abilities. So he was able to take down X Factor just like that. Now, for Havoc, he did not really get involved because he realized what is happening here, that his team and also the Ex-Patriots are not really able to take them down. He said, hey, listen, I had this card, and this card contains a lot of money, government money. You are able to take this card and have a shopping spree if you just walk away. And just like that, there goes Random. And so now for Havoc and his team, they can move on to now deal with the Ex-Patriots. Because, like I said, the expatriates came from Genosha. They have no idea that shortly after they had left, the whole event of the extinction agenda went down. And so Genosha is no longer a country where if you're a mutant, you're a slave. It's now that mutants and humans are supposedly trying to live in harmony. And so for Havoc, he's all like, listen, I want to take you guys back home to show you guys that technically Genosha is actually a better place. And so now X Factor is going to escort the expatriates back home to Genosha to supposedly prove a point that Genosha is a better place. Now, for Peter David, he's also reminding us that, well, when it comes to the character Wolfbane, we have to remember that she's trying to find her identity, her own personality, but also she's trying to find love. And so earlier on in Kanan Peter David's run, we saw her flirting a lot with, well, Havoc. But now she began to flirt with other guys on the actual team, like Jamie Maddox. And so we're kind of left to wonder where this could possibly go for her character. Now, the ending of this second chapter of today's video, we jump over to Genosha to kind of get the idea that they're trying to supposedly make this a better country, both mutants and also for humans as well. And so we actually pick up with the new president of Genosha, but we also see her having a meeting with another president from a different country known as Asnia. Now, I really thought at first that this other president from Asnia was going to be really important. And the reason why, because he does express the idea that he truly hates mutants, but I looked him up. He only appears in 2 books. This one and the next chapter that we are going to cover when it comes to X Factor. Now, we also see her introducing 2 other characters who are going to be somewhat important when it comes to repairing Genosha. That will be Moore Taggart and also Sasha Ryan. And Sasha Ryan is a new director of genetics when it comes to Genosha. But yes, these 2 characters are going to be very important when it comes to repairing Genosha and making it a better country now. Now, the backup story in this chapter is really more focusing on Quicksilver. And really, honestly, it does take place right before you had X Factor fighting against Random because Quicksilver was not there. And the reason why, because him and Val Cooper, they had a meeting. When it came to Quicksilver, he wanted to have a small vacation away from the actual team because apparently him and Crystal, the princess of the Inhumans, are trying to repair their relationship because in the early days of Marvel Comics, those 2 characters were actually married and then they got a divorce, or not really divorced, more kind of like just being separated, but they're trying to repair their actual relationship. And so you have Val Cooper go ahead and say, yes, you may leave to go on this vacation. Now, let's not forget, at the end of the last chapter, we saw something happen to her where she was pulled away by a bunch of tentacles. And so we're kind of left to wonder, is this Val Cooper or somebody pretending to be her, or possibly she's being controlled? Either way, she does approve Quicksilver's vacation time. And so you do have Quicksilver just go ahead and use his powers to pick up Crystal, and they go over to a cabin in the middle of the woods to have some alone time. And for Crystal, it kind of seems like Quicksilver is doing all the right moves he needs to do to hopefully repair their actual relationship, where we might see the 2 characters finally getting back together. But while you have Quicksilver and Crystal being able to spend some time with one another, we see a random old man in town apparently figuring out that Quicksilver and Crystal are apparently in the city, but really their main target is Quicksilver. And so now it's time for us to jump into X Factor issue number 89. Now, when we do, we actually pick up with the idea of Sasha Ryan working with somebody who's locked away behind some big metal doors. So now we know the new genetic person in charge on Genosha is also up to something. The question is right now, what is she actually up to? But now we have to jump over to X Factor. Now, this is X Factor and the Ex-Patriots both arriving to Genosha, where you actually do have the president of Genosha being there as well to greet them. Also, the other president is there as well to continue to spread his hatred. And really, after he walks away, this is his last time we are actually going to see him in, well, Marvel Comics. Either way, you do have the Ex-Patriots kind of trying to see if Genosha has truly changed. Now, you can tell people that you have changed, but it's actually your actions that kind of show, have you actually changed? Has the country actually got better? And so for the new president, that's her goal. Her goal is to show that yes, she was able to come in and begin the change in the actual country to make it a better place for both mutants and also the human race. Now, for Peter David, he had this ongoing joke going on in his books when it came to the Chalker family. Let me explain. So, the first Chalker we met was Vic Chalker. Now, Vic Chalker, he hated mutants a lot, and he wanted to kill off the entire mutant race. The problem with Vic was that he thought he had a good idea when it came to one of his projects. Unfortunately, that project got him killed. Now, when it came to Vic, his cousin Mick Chalker got involved and wanted to pick up where his cousin had left off at. The problem for Mick was that he had replaced his hands with blades, and well, those blades had an accident cut his own head off, and so he also died as well. But now we pick up with Dick Chalker. Now, Dick Chalker is actually the brother to Vic Chalker, the first guy, but the cousin to Mick Chalker. Now, for Dick, he's actually a mutant, better known as Carnivore. Now, for this mutant, well, he believed it's his fault that his brother and cousin have been killed off. And the reason why, because he was a mutant that had used his abilities to commit crime. And so because of that, he believes that Vic and Mick began to hate mutants because of him. And so now he wants to use his powers to kill off other mutants, but to also get revenge for his lost family members. The problem is that as soon as he leaves his lair, he is ran over by a truck. He is ran over by a truck and he's gone just like that. Now, for Peter David, he wants to show us that the nightmares for Wolfbane, they're getting worse. Like, as she continues on to go to sleep each night, she continues to have different kinds of nightmares. And the nightmares are taking dark turns now. And so sometimes she might wake up in the middle of the night freaking out. Like, for example, right here. She's waking up after trying to get some rest after traveling across the world. And because of her recent nightmares and her freaking out, she wakes up Moira Taggart. Now, I want to establish that Moira Taggart used to be like the actual guardian for Wolfbane in the early days of the New Mutants. So for Moira Taggart, she's kind of like a mother to Wolfbane. Now, for Peter David, he also want to show us that the character Strong Guy is beginning to build a relationship with one of the members of the Ex-Patriots, and that would be Jo Beth, because you have Jo Beth actually take Strong Guy over to her grandma's house. So we are beginning to see these two characters build up a nice relationship with one another. Now, I want to jump back over to Havoc and also Prodigy. Now, Prodigy is actually the leader of the Ex-Patriots, but I also want to focus on the president of Genosha as well, because, like I said earlier, she's trying to show that Genosha has gotten better. It's getting better. But the problem is you still have some mutants right there who kind of feel like they're slaves. And so for Prodigy, her words are just words. Like, yes, she has done some things. She has did some action to kind of show that she's trying to make things better for the entire nation. But the problem is she has to continue if she wants to get Prodigy on her side. And really, she wants Prodigy there to kind of help with the actual process. Now, I want to jump back over to Wolfbane. Here's the reason why. Because you have Wolfbane getting some tests done by Moira Taggart. Now, these tests really do show that the reason why Wolfbane is falling in love for Havoc is all because of what happened back in the extension agenda. Let me explain. Because like I said earlier, she was kidnapped and brought over to Genosha. But back then in Genosha, if you were a mutant, you were a slave. The problem was, though, while she was going through the actual process of being turned into a slave, they put her in a slave relationship with Havoc because he was also a slave as well. forcing two slaves to be together. Now, even though Havoc was able to break away from the slave program, and so did Wolfbane, it kind of seems like her mind and body is still trying to adjust from the idea of no longer being a slave. But the problem is, it's still affecting her. And so that is why she's in love with Havoc, because what they did to her when she was kidnapped and brought over to Genosha. Now, the ending of this book really does remind us that there's something going on with Sasha Ryan, because we actually see her go confront her mysterious character. And apparently, they have big plans for Genosha, but those plans are now officially on hold. And the reason why? Because X Factor is there. And so for this story, we're kind of left to wonder, where is Peter David gonna take us next when it comes to X Factor? But now we have to jump back over to Quicksilver. Now, for Quicksilver, we're still continuing the whole idea of the possibility of him and also Crystal getting back together, because we do see the two characters still at the cabin. They're still spending time with one another. The only thing is, you have Crystal wondering what had changed in Quicksilver, and he tells her that what he has done is gone to therapy. Thanks to therapy, he realized what he wanted in life and how to achieve those things in life, like getting back with his wife, Crystal. And so we are beginning to see a beautiful relationship coming back together. But the problem is, for Quicksilver, he has to go in town to pick up some groceries. Now, you're kind of wondering, how is that actually a problem, though, Fresh? Well, let me explain. You see, when you have Quicksilver arrive at the store, we do learn the store is actually owned by the old man we saw at the tail end of the last chapter. The old man who kind of told somebody that Quicksilver and Crystal were there at the cabin. And so when you have Quicksilver arrive at the grocery store, he does see the old man, but he also sees a reporter. Now, this reporter claims that he reports all superhero things happening on the East Coast. And apparently, he got some photos of Crystal with another man. Now, in reality, for Quicksilver, he knows the photos are actually fake. But at the same time, the whole idea of her maybe having another man while they were separated is now in his mind. The seed has been planted. And these two guys, they wanted that to happen. And so when you have Quicksilver go back to the cabin, he asked her, like, hey, did you see anybody else when we were separated? And she says no. But the problem is, though, he has that doubt in his mind now. And she can tell that he does. What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over the X-Men, right? And we're going our way up to Fatal Attractions. But now we're trying to cover some more X Factor as we dive into Fatal Attractions very soon on my channel. But before we're able to do that, we still got to cover at least one more story that leads into Fatal Attractions when it comes to X Factor. A two-part story arc that takes place in X Factor issue 90 and issue number 91. Now, with this two-part story arc, it's all about the idea of a major secret being hidden right now by Genosha. Now, if you have been following my coverage over the X-Men, you would know that in the early days of Genosha, we had learned that it was a country that was trying to paint this picture of a perfect nation, that everybody is happy, everyone is doing good, everything is perfect there. But in reality, it was not like that for mutants. If you were a mutant, then most likely you were a slave. Not most likely, you were a slave. And you were being used as a way to help build up the nation, to make it a stronger place in different kinds of ways. Now, thanks to an event called the Extinction Agenda, you had the X-Men, X Factor, and the New Mutants being able to actually begin the process of changing the nation around. Now, when it came to X Factor, the new X Factor team, they ran into a group of characters known as the Patriots or Ex-Patriots. Now, when it came to the Ex-Patriots, they left Genosha believing that they needed to find a new home. They had no idea Genosha had begun the process of actually changing. And so for X Factor, the new one that is actually a government-led team by Havoc, he said, listen, let us take you back over to Genosha, and you will learn that it's actually a better place now for all mutants. And so today's story arc kind of picks up where that last story arc left off at, but it's our heroes kind of discovering that there is a major secret going on when it comes to Genosha. But as we dive into issue number 90 for X Factor, the opening pages of that book reminds us about what's going on with Wolfbane at this moment in time in Marvel Comics. You see, for Wolfbane, we had learned that when she was a slave on Genosha, they had actually modified her in a way to kind of put in her mind that she's in love with Havoc to kind of pair up the two characters. Now, this makes a lot of sense. And the reason why, because when it came to Peter David, at the very beginning of his run on X Factor, when he had introduced the new team, she was madly in love with Havoc. And we had no idea why. Now, there were other guys that she was attracted to, but the main guy was actually Havoc. And no one knew why. Because when she was a slave, and so was he, they tried to make sure these two slaves would actually pair up with one another. And so she kind of realized that her mind was being forced to fall in love with Havoc. It wasn't natural. And so she's very upset with that and kind of took her anger out on Polaris, the current girlfriend for Havoc. Now, for Polaris, she does understand what Wolfbane is going through, but she needs Wolfbane to calm down. Now, when it comes to this book, it also reminded me that at this time, Polaris had no idea that she was the daughter of Magneto, because she tells us that there was a moment in time where Mesmero was trying to play mind games on her by making her believe that she was actually the daughter of Magneto. And so at this time, she still believes that she is not the daughter of Magneto. Either way, though, you do have Polaris say, listen, I know what it's like to have your mind messed with. You forgot that there was a good time where malice had taken over my body and sent my mind away deep in my body, and I was no longer able to be in control of my own body. She used my body for whatever she wanted to do in the world. But then later on, I was able to regain control of myself and be free once again. So you have the two ladies being able to bond with one another and actually calm down. Now, like I said at the very beginning of this video, for X Factor, they came back over to Genosha believing that it's now a better nation, but also they wanted to prove to the Ex-Patriots that it is actually a better nation now. But the problem is for Havoc, he found some devices that he realized that are being used as a way to monitor the mutants of Genosha, because most of the mutants of Genosha, they were slaves. And so they have to go through a process to change their minds and kind of fix them so that they're no longer slaves of Genosha. It's a whole actual process. But for Havoc, finding these devices, he believes that Genosha's new government is trying to monitor the mutants to find a way to actually control their minds, to find a new way to make them slaves. And so you have Havoc just going out of his way to blow up all these different devices. Now, for Havoc and Strong Guy, they are actually confronted by another mutant known as Piecemeal, who is actually working for the government of Genosha. And really, it's not him being a slave. He actually took the job with his own free will. Now, I'm not going to sit down and try to explain the powers of Piecemeal because right now, he's not really that important. Just know that after a couple more pages, you actually have Havoc and Strong Guy being able to defeat him. But once they do defeat him, you then have the president of Genosha tell Havoc, like, listen, I think it's time you guys know the actual truth. Now, before we are able to learn what is going on with Genosha, we have to jump over to Quicksilver. Now, in our last video, when it came to Quicksilver, he took a break from the team so that he would be able to repair his relationship with Crystal of the Inhumans. And the reason why, because, well, they were not technically divorced, but they were separated. And he was trying to repair the relationship so that them and their daughter could be a family again. And so at first, everything was going great until he ran into some kind of reporter at a nearby store at the cabin they were staying at. Now, this reporter had told Quicksilver that Crystal was with another guy. And so for Quicksilver, he hates the whole idea that, well, they were broken up, that she met another guy. Now, he does ask Crystal, and she tells him no, that did not happen. But he does not believe her. And so it's him calling Val Cooper right now to tell her, like, hey, listen, I might need more time away from the team because right now there are a lot of things going on with me and also Crystal. Now, while he's on the phone or on this call with Val Cooper, you have Jamie Madrox walk into the room. And he wants to tell Quicksilver, like, hey, we need your help here on Genosha. But Val Cooper, she ends the call before he's actually able to tell Quicksilver what's happening on Genosha. But now we have to jump over to our heroes, all the X Factor, because they're now going to learn what is exactly happening on Genosha at this moment. What is the big secret? And so you have our heroes be taken over to a nearby hospital. And the reason why, because this hospital was actually shut down recently. But the reason why is because they're currently using that hospital as a research center, because we now see that there are a group of mutants that are dying from some kind of disease. Now, if you saw our other X-Men videos by this point in our coverage leading into Fatal Attractions, you would know that this would be the legacy virus. The legacy virus is out there slowly killing off mutants left and right. And so right now for X-Factor, it's them finding out about this actual virus, because now they're realizing that there are now mutants dying from some disease. Now, for our heroes, they have no idea that this virus is worldwide. They only believe the virus is right now only on Genosha. Now, you do have our heroes be confronted by Moira Taggart. Now, for Moira Taggart being here, it does take place before all the other videos when it comes to Illyana, the younger sister of Colossus, dying from the legacy virus. And so right now, it's her trying to make her way over to the X-Men to begin doing her research alongside with Charles Xavier to hopefully find a cure for the legacy virus. But as we all know, right now, there is no actual cure. That mutants are dying at a very fast rate. Now, this leads into a conversation between Moira Taggart and also Wolfbane. You see, for Wolfbane, she's actually the adoptive daughter to Moira Taggart. And so you have Wolfbane kind of begging Moira Taggart to stay on Genosha because she's leaving to go see Charles Xavier to hopefully find a cure for this virus. But for Wolfbane, she needs her mother right now because she had just learned about the whole idea that her mind was programmed to be in love with Havoc. It's not her own free will to fall in love with Havoc. She wants her mom there to be a scientist, but to also be a mother. But for Moira Taggart, she's kind of like, listen, I can't do this right now. I have to leave. And the reason why? Because what's happening across the world to all mutants. And so she just walks away. Now, the ending of this chapter is really more of X-Factor finding out that one of the mutants that were being treated for the legacy virus had decided to escape the actual facility to die somewhere else away from the actual facility. Now, once you had a scientist and security team find out that mutant had escaped, they're trying to actually kill off that mutant just in case before it's able to spread the virus. They have no idea how the virus is actually being spread. Now, for X-Factor, that's not okay at all. They're kind of like, listen, you are not going to kill that mutant at all. We're going to find the mutant and bring him back here without you guys trying to terminate him. And so now it's X-Factor rushing to hopefully save that mutant before Genosha's government team actually kills it off. And so as we dive into X Factor issue number 91, we kind of pick up with our heroes is trying their best to find that mutant that had escaped. Now, for our heroes, they're all wearing some protective suit as a way to protect them just in case they are able to get the virus from the young mutant that had escaped. Now, they're also fighting against the magistrate. Now, the magistrate is the government, army, or police force for Genosha. Either way, our heroes are fighting against them. Really, right now, it's just Havoc and also Strong Guy. Now, you have Polaris tell us that she found a map in her system or her suit system that kind of shows where everybody is at. And she's telling them right now, like, hey, guys, listen, I see the mutant. And right now, none of us are really nearby. But hey, let's all try our best to make our way over to him. And so you have Polaris being able to kind of give directions to each hero to hopefully find the young mutant. Now, for our team, they're kind of worried for Wolfbane. Now, really, when it comes to our heroes, they're just worried that Wolfbane might just go berserk and go crazy and try to kill off the magistrate members left and right. Because right now, how angry she is finding out that her mind was programmed to fall in love with Havoc. But when they do arrive to find Wolfbane, and they do see her being a tad bit crazy and actually not killing off, but attacking different members of the magistrate, you have our hero try to calm her down, and she's all like, listen, I'm not that far gone where I'm going to actually kill them off. I'm not going berserk. Matter of fact, I'm pretty calm. And please stop talking to me in a way where it's kind of like I'm some wild animal. But either way, you do have our heroes continue on to hopefully find the young mutant that had escaped earlier. Now, I want to jump back over to Val Cooper because you have Val being able to actually find Quicksilver, which means that she left Genosha in the middle of the whole idea of the entire team finding out that, hey, there's a virus going around right now on Genosha killing off mutants. But she does fly back over to where Quicksilver is at. Now, when she finds him, he's at a bar because he's very upset about the idea that he was not able to fix his relationship with Crystal. But either way, we also have to remember that this is not Val Cooper. And what I mean by that statement is that for Val Cooper, she was actually taken over or something happened to her right after you had the entire team get some therapy sessions. And so we still have no idea what exactly had happened to her. We have to believe right now that this is a Val Cooper who has some evil plans up her sleeve sooner or later that could affect all the members of X Factor. Now, I want to jump over to Jamie Madrox, and the reason why, because he was able to find the young mutant that had escaped. The thing is, the young mutant had collapsed, and the reason why, because the young mutant is going into cardiac arrest. Now, here's the problem, though, because for X Factor, they're very worried about the idea and the possibility they might actually get the virus. But at the same time, they got to this young man's life. And so for Jamie Madrox, he realized that in the possibility to save the young man's life, he might have do CPR, but to also have somebody else pump the heart of the young mutant. And so he needs, well, a clone of himself. But the problem is, if he does reabsorb that clone, there is a possibility he might actually get the virus. And that is a really huge thing here. But before we are able to actually see that, we have to jump over to Havoc and also Wolfbane, because you have Havoc wanting to have a conversation with Wolfbane because he also learned what happened to her. The whole idea that her mind was programmed to fall in love with him. And he wants to have that conversation with her, but she says no. And the reason why, because the way he's phrasing how he wants to have this conversation. It's his wants. It's his needs. It's not really him expressing that he's actually concerned for her. What does she want? What does she need? And so right now, she's kind of like, no, we got a job to do. So let's go right now and hopefully save the life of that young mutant. Now, to go ahead and end today's video, we actually jump back over to Jamie Madrox, where you have Jamie right now trying to wonder how in the world is he going to be able to save the life of this young mutant who's right now going into cardiac arrest? Now, for Jamie, he knows that he has no choice here. He has to make a clone of himself so they're able to work together to save the life of this young mutant. But he's afraid of the idea of his clone getting the virus, because if his clone does and he reabsorbs his clone, then Jamie himself would also get the virus. And so it's him just freaking out in the possibility that he might get the virus. But at the same time, he wants to be a hero. And so he does make a clone of himself. And you do have him and the clone being able to save the life of the young mutant. And once they do, they take the young mutant back over to the hospital. Now, the problem is that he had to reabsorb that clone. And so now we're kind of left to wonder in the possibility, does Jamie now have the legacy virus? And if he does, will he die or will he survive? But this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. Now, what's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to begin our coverage over Fatal Attractions. I have been telling you guys that sooner or later we are going to begin our coverage over Fatal Attractions. But before we actually properly dive into this crossover, there are some things we have to talk about. Now, when it came to Fatal Attractions, it was another X-Men crossover. This time, you had all 5 teams: Uncanny X-Men, X-Men, X-Force, Excalibur, X-Factor. All 5 teams are taking part in this event. You also have a Wolverine book as well that take part in this crossover. But here's the thing about Fatal Attractions. So when it comes to Fatal Attractions, the first chapter is actually X-Factor issue number 92. Now, I went on the internet to kind of see how other people truly felt about this certain issue. And I realized that there were other people out there who were kind of like me, where if you're believing that this chapter right here is part of the crossover, you're going to feel a tad bit wrong here. And the reason why, because as you read issue number 92 for X Factor, you realize that it's not really part of Fatal Attractions like the other chapters are, because X-Force, Excalibur, X-Men, they all kind of fit together to tell this overall story of Magneto coming back, attacking the X-Men, doing a horrible thing to Wolverine. All those chapters kind of seem like they go together in some kind of way. But over for X Factor, it feels more of like Scott Lobdell was trying his best to pick up where Peter David left off at, because Peter David left at issue number 89 for X Factor. But there were some loose ends that weren't tied up before he had left. And so for Scott, it's kind of like, okay, I'm coming in and trying to pick up where Peter left off at. And so with him doing that, it's also him trying to set things up for Fatal Attractions, like the whole idea of the return of the Acolytes once again attacking a nearby hospital. And so as we get into the opening pages for this chapter, we actually pick up at a hospital. Not really a hospital, really more of a hospice care center for people who are on the verge of death. And really, you have this nurse telling us what went down when it came to the Acolytes attacking that facility. Now, the only reason why they are attacking that facility because it's full of a bunch of humans that they believe should be killed off just like that. And so they barge into that facility, killing off people left and right. It does not even matter. They're in hospice care. They're on the verge of death. They don't care. They have to die. And doing all of this in the name of Magneto. Now, by this point in our coverage over the X-Men, they don't know that Magneto is still alive. Like, he's not officially back yet to the rest of the world. But there were some clues left behind in different books saying like, hey, Magneto is coming back. And when he does, is going to be a huge problem down the road. And so right now, the acolytes are being led by Fabian Cortez. Now, Fabian Cortez had killed off Magneto to make him a martyr, to get other people more inspired to do Magneto's work, to attack the human race, that mutants should take over the world. And so right now, when it comes to this group of acolytes, they're over here killing off humans left or right in the name of their god, Magneto, because humans do not deserve to live. Mutants should rule the world. And so we see them kill almost every single person in that facility. So now we jump back over to the present day where you have X-Factor hearing this story by the nurse, the only person who has survived the actual incident. Now, here's the thing. You do have this lady telling the story, but it's really more of the book trying to focus on Quicksilver. And the reason why, because by this point in Marvel Comics, he was still the son of Magneto before the whole retcon down the road saying that he was never the son of Magneto. But by this point, he was. And so for Pietro, he hates the idea of hearing these stories about his father. It is not like, oh, hey, my dad was a great man. No, he knows that his father was an evil man. His father is just so messed up. And so for Pietro, he hates the idea that his father had inspired a group of people to go out of their way to attack innocent people like this nurse. And really, while you have X-Factor leaving her room, she dies right there. She flatlines on that bed. And so for Quicksilver, it's more of like, great. There's now a group of people out there that my father had inspired to go out of their way to attack humans, to kill off humans because mutants should rule the world. And so for Quicksilver, he hates the idea of just being the son of Magneto. But like I said a moment ago, when it comes to Magneto, for the acolytes, they look at him as their god, as their great savior of the mutant race. But here's the thing. If Magneto is their god, that means Quicksilver is their Jesus. Because you then had this one acolyte who was able to hide in the hospital. And she sees Pietro. And she's all like, oh my God. It is the son of Magneto, like he is their Jesus. And so she freaks out and she goes back to her leader of the acolytes, and that would be Fabian Cortez. Now, like I said a moment ago, Fabian Cortez was the person who had killed off Magneto to make him a martyr so that people would be inspired to go out there to attack the human race. But also, when it comes to Fabian Cortez, he's part of the Upstart organization. Now remember, the Upstart organization was a group of people who would go out of their way to kill other mutants out there to receive points. If you had the most points, then you were the actual leader of the group. If you killed off a more powerful mutant, you would get more points for that kill. And so for Fabian, he had supposedly killed off Magneto and received a lot of points. But recently he found out that, well, maybe, just maybe, Magneto is actually alive. And if he is coming back very soon. But also that means that Fabian had lost a lot of points in the Upstart organization. But either way, he does hear about the idea of Pietro, the son of Magneto. And he wants to use Pietro as a way to kind of continue his control over the acolytes. But getting back over to the Pentagon, we do learn that they were able to capture at least one member of the acolytes, X-Factor was. And so their main goal is to interrogate this guy, to hopefully get some kind of information out of him. Now, you do have Havoc and Val Cooper kind of go back and forth, and really, I'll explain why here in a moment, but I kind of want to focus more on the whole idea of this interrogation, because you have the team trying their best to get all the info they need to figure out what is the next move of the acolytes, but also possibly where is their base so that they can finally take down this group. But then Pietro walks in, and when he walks in, like I said earlier, they look at him as their Jesus. And so for this one member of the acolyte who's now a prisoner, when he sees Pietro, he bows down to Pietro like, oh my God, you are the Jesus to our organization. I will tell you everything you want to know. Just like that. You didn't have Pietro being able to get all the info he needs about what is possibly the next move of the Acolytes. Now, 1 hour later, we actually see that you have Val Cooper try to take Quicksilver over to another military base that's actually going to be attacked by the Acolytes, because that one Acolyte was able to give Pietro all the info he needs to tell them what is the Acolytes' next move. Now, for Havoc, who is the actual leader of X Factor, he wants the entire team to go. But for Val Cooper, she says no. She only wants her and Quicksilver to go. And that's really it. Now, here comes the big problem. You see, for Val Cooper, back in I want to say it was issue number 86 or 87, where we saw that while every single member of X Factor were able to get some kind of therapy session, something grabbed Val Cooper. And ever since that moment, she has been acting different, more aggressive. Now, we're also kind of left to believe in the possibility that she was replaced. Either way, she tells Havoc and the rest of X Factor they cannot go to this other military base. And she's also hoping that with all the Acolytes trying to treat Pietro like he is Jesus, maybe when they arrive at the other military base, they won't actually attack it. They'll stop because they see Pietro as their Jesus and stop attacking the actual base. She also says because Havoc is too aggressive now, too hot-headed, and he might cause a lot of damage at that military base. And so her and Pietro, they leave. Now, for Havoc, he always has a backup plan. You see, for me personally, and guys, don't hate me for this, because I do know some folks out there are like, how dare you say anything wrong about Chris Claremont? Guys, it's just my opinion. We could all be friends still. But for the character of Havoc, I truly felt like Chris Claremont did not really do a great job when it came to the character development of Havoc. I felt like Peter David really did a better job when it came to giving Havoc his time to shine. Like, hey, you know what? This is Havoc. He's more than just the boyfriend to Polaris or the younger brother to Cyclops. That in reality, he could be a good leader just like his brother. And so we see that when it came to Havoc, he always felt like that something was off about Val Cooper ever since those therapy sessions. You see, you have Havoc tell Polaris to track the helicopter that Val and also Pietro are using to head over to that other military base. But then the rest of X Factor, they're going to be using a different jet that was given to them by Forge, where they should be able to follow Val's helicopter without actually being detected. But while trying to do that, they run into Exodus. Now, this is the first appearance of Exodus. And the way the book brings them in, you're kind of like, okay, who is this character? And really, we do not get the chance to learn anything about the character at all because he just goes ahead and disappears just like that, leaving our heroes wondering who the heck that was. And for us as the readers, the same thing as well, like, who was that guy? He does seem very mysterious, but now he's gone and our team can continue to follow Val and also Pietro. Now, I want to jump back over to Cooper and also Pietro because they also brought another character with them, and that would be Random. Now, when it comes to Random, he has the mutant ability to kind of adapt to other mutant abilities. So honestly, he's a hard character to defeat. And really, the last time we saw him, the only reason why our heroes were able to defeat him was by actually giving him money because he's a bounty hunter. The whole idea of if you pay me money, I'll do the job. If you don't, guess what happens? I ain't doing the job. Either way, Val hired him to come alongside with her and Pietro over to this other military base. Now, this is her also telling a big secret that's going on at this military base. Now, mind you, this base is being run by Senator Kelly. Now, you already know, when it comes to Kelly, his whole thing is that he hates mutants, but at the same time, he still wants to give them a fair chance in the world. It's kind of like he's on that line right there, going back and forth on, if he should help mutants or try to get rid of mutants. And with all that being said, apparently he's the one in charge of this base. And he's very upset of the fact that Val is there, but also alongside with two mutants, Ransom and also Pietro. Now for Pietro, he wants to know what in the world is happening at this military base. What does the Acolytes want so bad from this base? And that is the moment where she shows Pietro and Ransom a room full of Sentinels, a new kind of Sentinels, by taking the old models and trying to fuse those models with the Nimrod program to make newer versions of Sentinels to use against the mutant race. But let's not forget that when it came to Havoc, he made sure they were able to follow Val, Pietro, and also Random over to this other military base. And so when our heroes do arrive, they see what's happening at the moment. They see that Val had just revealed that the government is still working on creating new kinds of Sentinels. And so for Havoc, he's very upset about the idea that he was not even told about this project. Now for Havoc, it's kind of like, listen, you, the government, came to us, the X-Men, and said, hey, listen, we need a superhero team that's full of mutants that's working for the government as a way to build relations between the government and also the mutant race. That was y'all goal. But here y'all right now creating Sentinels. Now for Val, she says, listen, we have a very good reason. Why? Because you have to look at the bigger picture. You have all those different groups out there of mutants, evil mutants that are attacking humans, just like the Acolytes. The humans have the right to protect themselves. Now for Havoc, it's still wrong. But you have Pietro say, no, she's right. And that's really huge. Because you have Pietro saying, you have to understand here, Havoc, that I have been by my father's side for many years, and I have seen what the man has done to humans out there in the world. Humans who were completely innocent, just minding their business. The Acolytes, as we just saw at the very beginning of this video, attacked a group of people who were technically on the verge of death, but killed them all because they were humans. There are evil mutants just like there are evil humans out there. And so as we mutants, we have the right to protect ourselves. But at the same time, so does the humans. They have the right to protect themselves as well from mutants who are technically evil. But while you have everybody talking to one another, that is when you have the Acolytes arrive. Now, it does seem like the Acolytes are here just for the different parts of the Sentinels to use their own personal reasons. We don't get an actual reason here, but it does lead into a battle between the X-Factor team and also the Acolytes. But while the battling is going on, you don't have Pietro actually taking part in the actual battle. And the reason why, because he is called away by Fabian Cortez. You see, you have Fabian Cortez trying to tell Pietro, like, listen, you are the son of Magneto. What you need to do is to actually take your place alongside with us. Matter of fact, you should lead the Acolytes because it's your birthright. You are the son of Magnus, the son of Magneto. Now, for Fabian Cortez, it's also him trying to play some word games on the mind of Pietro. Like, listen, you may hate the idea of your father. You may be trying to run away from the things your father did over the years in this world. But listen, no matter what, you are still his son. And sooner or later, you are going to be just like your father. It's your fate. Now, for Pietro, it's more like, no, I have the right to choose my own fate for my life. I will not be part of what my dad was to this world. This crazy mutant who believed the idea that mutants should just fight for their own right and kill off all humans. It is completely wrong. But for Fabian, he said, I watched you down there. You did not take part in that battle at all. And the reason why, because you realize that both sides are right. There are humans out there who are killing off mutants left and right, killing us off for no good reason. But at the same time, though, there are also mutants out there who are killing off innocent humans for no good reason left and right. So you're kind of wondering which is the right move. But I'm here to help you make the right move. If you choose us, I'll tell my acolytes stop fighting and we'll leave, but you'll be our new leader. Now, again, for Pietro, he hates the idea of picking up where his dad left off at, and he says no. And after he says no, you then have every single member of the acolytes being able to actually teleport away. Now, when they're able to get the heck out of there is really more because of Amelia Voigt. Now, we have not really learned much about the character just yet. All we know is that she does have some kind of connection with Charles Xavier, but for Amelia, she has the ability to turn matter into vapor. And so she turned every single member of the acolytes into vapor as a way to leave the base without being captured by X-Factor. Now, when it came to Kelly, he told his security team, hey, listen, go ahead and move all the different Sentinels out of the base right now before X-Factor can do anything to them at all, including the acolytes. And so right now, the entire base is completely clean. Now, after all of that, you see, we learned that when it comes to, well, Val Cooper, she was being controlled by the acolytes. They had something inside of her to kind of make her more aggressive, but also force her hand to show X-Factor what the government is doing behind the scenes. The whole idea of these new Sentinels being made. Now, she hates the idea that she had lied to X-Factor because she looks at them as her friends. But now they're kind of like, you betrayed us. You did not tell us the truth. You knew about this actual secret. Like, technically, you're almost as bad as my father because you're now giving them tools to use against my people, the mutant race. And so for Val Cooper, she had just lost all respect from the entire team of X-Factor. She is no longer their friend anymore. It's more of like, you're on this team because the government wants you there to watch over us. But now we kind of realize that we can't trust you. If you knew about this, you should have told us. Now you're telling us you didn't have the right to tell us. You're telling us that his new project was more of a failsafe just in case X Factor does not work out. But in reality, you still lied to us, to your friends. And so they walk away, and that ends Fatal Attractions for X Factor. And this is where what's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over the X-Men, but now we're going to jump back over to some more X-Factor, and we're going to cover X-Factor issue number 93. Now, issue number 93 is technically an epilogue for the X-Factor chapter of Fatal Attractions, and it also came out before most of the chapters when it comes to Fatal Attractions. Let me explain. You see, in my last video, I had talked about the idea that when it came to Fatal Attractions, the X-Factor chapter alone kind of felt like it was a prelude, a prologue leading into the actual Fatal Attractions event, because even though it was technically labeled as a crossover with all the X titles, for X Factor, their chapter kind of felt like it was on their own, doing its own kind of story for X Factor, but also kind of building up the idea of some changes being done in X Factor very soon, especially for the character better known as Val Cooper. And you see what I mean as we go through today's video. But yes, this right here is really more of an epilogue for the X Factor chapter of Fatal Attractions. Now, in the opening pages of this book, we actually pick up with both Havoc and also Wolfbane paying a visit over to the school of Charles Xavier. Now, when it comes to X Factor issue number 93, it does take place after Uncanny X-Men issue number 303, the whole idea of the death of Ileana. Because when you have our two heroes arrive at the school, they remember that they were just told that she had died. Now, with that being said, they came here because they believed just possibly that Charles Xavier might be able to help out Wolfbane. And I'll explain more about that here in a moment. But while you have our two characters walk into the actual building, they are confronted by different members of the X-Men. Bobby Drake, Iceman, Archangel, and also Colossus. Now, for Wolfbane and also Havoc, they want to know how Colossus is doing because this man lost his sister, like she is gone. And matter of fact, if you have seen my other X-Men videos, you would know the man has gone through a lot in a very short period of time. He lost his brother to suicide. His parents were killed off by the Russian government. And now his sister has died thanks to the legacy virus. This man is now on his own. But right now, he's kind of showing off the idea that he's okay. And right now, he does not be bothered at all about the death of his sister. Now, when it comes to the rest of X Factor, they have stayed behind at the base. And so we actually pick up with Quicksilver and Polaris. Now, for Quicksilver, he has also gone through a lot in a very short period of time. The whole idea of him trying to fix his marriage, and unfortunately, it didn't work out for him. We're also being told that for Quicksilver, he's being told that he has to wear a new outfit because his outfit does not really match the rest of X Factor. And so it's kind of like, hey, listen, I'm going to need you to go ahead and change to an outfit that kind of matches with the rest of the team. And really, same for Polaris as well. Kind of give them new outfits to follow along with the rest of X Factor. But now we have to jump over to Jamie Madrox. Now, this is something we have not really talked about because in our last video, it kind of seemed pointless to me, but I guess I'm wrong. You see, when it came to our last video, when it came to X Factor, they had fought against the Acolytes. And there was a moment where for Jamie, he had to kill off one of the members of the Acolytes to just survive. And for him, that was kind of like his first kill. And so currently, he's still trying to get over the fact that he killed somebody. And so right now, he's technically just locked up in his room, not wanting to talk to anybody at all about what he is going through. Now, for Strong Guy, I actually feel a tad bit sad for him here because for Strong Guy, he's just right now trying to take a shower, but also trying to bring some more self-love into his life. And so while trying to take a shower, well, out of nowhere, you have a random woman appear. Now, at first, he's not really able to tell us, or really he can't see who it is. And honestly, the way the book is drawn, we're not even able to tell who it is. But apparently this person is a very powerful teleporter because she appears in the shower naked, grabs Strong Guy, and teleport away somewhere else. Now, in our last video, we had talked about the idea of Havoc being a leader. And what I mean by that statement is that in our last video, we had talked that when it came to Chris Claremont, he didn't do a good job when it came to the character development of Havoc. And really, it was Peter David who said, hey, you know what? Why not try to do something new with Havoc? Why not try to make him a leader? And so you have Havoc go downstairs and walk up to his brother, Scott Summers. Now for Scott, Cyclops has been a leader since the very first issue of X-Men comics. And so for Scott, being a leader is like the only thing he knows how to do when it comes to being on the X-Men team. But for Havoc, he still knew the idea of trying to be a leader. And so for Cyclops, he can tell that there's something going on with his brother. And honestly, there is. The whole idea of Wolfbane being programmed to love him, the whole idea of the revival of Project Wide Awake, and the whole idea of basically everything else X Factor has gone through in a very short period of time. Now, it's also having wondering, are they going to be able to achieve the goal of Charles Xavier? The whole idea of humans and mutants being able to live together in harmony. But for Cyclops, it's more of like, listen, even though that dream may seem like we cannot actually achieve it, we still gotta try, because if we don't, then who will? Now let's jump over to Wolfbane, because this begins the process of Wolfbane actually leaving the team. You see, for Wolfbane, back in the extension agenda, her and Havoc were actually kidnapped by Genosha. Now remember, when it came to Genosha in the early days of Marvel Comics, it was trying to paint this picture of a perfect nation. If you live there, you'll have no issues at all. It's the perfect place to live. If you are a human, if you were a mutant in reality, you were a slave to help build up that country. And so when it came to Wolfbane and also Havoc, they were kidnapped and they were turned into slaves for Genosha. Now for Wolfbane, she was actually programmed to fall in love with Havoc. And so for a while there, she thought like, okay, you know what? She's gaining feelings for Havoc. But in reality, they had messed with her mind to make her fall in love with Havoc. And so that's why she's here with Charles Xavier, hoping that Charles can find a way to actually turn her back to normal. But here comes the big problem though. You see, for Wolfbane, when she was turned into a slave, she kind of got forced into her wolf form and stuck in that wolf form. Let me explain, because if she goes back into her human form, she goes back into slave mode. And so to kind of stay out of that slave mode, she got to stay in her wolf form. But the problem is, the longer she stays in that wolf form, it alters her brain more and more into a beast type brain. And so for Charles Xavier, what he's telling her is that he can't really reprogram her mind to no longer be in love with Havoc. He tells her like, the only way to actually help you is to turn you back into your human form. But if we do that, then most likely you'll go back into your slave mode mindset. And so technically you're stuck in that wolf form, but also I cannot actually go through the process of hoping to save your life. So technically, you're stuck with being in wolf form, but also stuck being in love with Havoc. Now, I want to jump back over to Strong Guy. And the reason why, because we learned that Strong Guy was taken away by Lila. Lila is a very powerful mutant, a very powerful teleporter, where she is actually able to teleport across the universe. Now, when it comes to Lila, she has been on tour across the entire universe. Now, in the early days of X-Men comics, when it came to Strong Guy, unfortunately, he was a nobody. He was just her bodyguard. And that was really it. But then over time, when it came to X-Men comics, we saw the evolution of Strong Guy no longer just being that bodyguard and actually becoming a member of X Factor. And so for Strong Guy, he's telling her like, first off, you teleport me across the universe naked in front of a crowd of aliens, but also you have to understand, I'm no longer your bodyguard. I'm no longer your guy on your side. I'm now, an actual member of a team of heroes. I have full on responsibilities I have to focus on. And so for Lila, she kind of does tease on the whole idea of being more responsible, but at the same time, she understands where he is coming from. The whole idea that now he has X Factor and he has to focus on that. Now, getting back over to Havoc, you have Havoc just waiting for Charles Xavier and also Wolfbane. Unfortunately, he's waiting for so long that for Havoc, he does get a tad bit bored, but also a tad bit impatient. Either way, you do have Havoc try to access the files of Charles Xavier. And when he does that, he finds a very important file, something labeled the Mutant Underground. Now, we're not really told what that exactly means, but apparently it's something very important. And so for Charles Xavier, when he does come into the room and he sees Havoc on his computer, you have Havoc ask him, hey, what is the Mutant Underground? And for Charles, it's more of like, listen, I will tell you when you need to know. For right now, I feel like you don't need to know at all. Now, for Havoc, because he knows Charles so well, he'll, somewhat let it slide for the moment. But for Havoc, he still wants to know more about this underground. But then out of nowhere, you have Wolfbane walk into the room. When she walks into the room, it's really more of her telling Havoc that she is officially leaving the team. And the reason why, because she hates the idea of being around him, having all those feelings inside of her, but not really be her feelings. Like, she understands that she does not really love him. It's her mind being programmed to actually love Havoc. And so it's her saying, I have to leave. I have to go over to Muir Island to hopefully find a way to fix my brain. And so it's kind of her being pushed out of the book, it seems like. But then we jump back over to the rest of X Factor. And really, those 2 pages are really more just Polaris, Havoc, and also Strong Guy kind of showing off their new outfits. And honestly, kind of like Quicksilver's outfit because it now feels like he's actually an X character now. Like he's actually part of the team. So for me personally, it's kind of cool to see him being on this team now wearing an actual outfit that matches the rest of the team. Now, like I said at the very beginning of this video, where we kind of had to see the end for Val Cooper as well. Now remember, when it comes to X Factor, it's all about the idea that they are a government team that's trying to build relations between the government and also the mutant race. Now, Val Cooper, I said Cooper. That's a huge mistake right there. But Val Cooper, her main goal was to just watch over X Factor, to make sure they fall in line when it comes to working for the government. But in our last video, our heroes found out about Project Wide Awake, the rebirth of Project Wide Awake, the whole idea of the government trying to create new versions of the Sentinels just in case they have to use them against the mutant race. And so because she had been lying to the entire team, the team kind of felt like they could no longer trust her. And so you have the government bringing in somebody else to replace her. And that person is going to be Forge. And bam, just like that, Forge is now in charge of X Factor. And now it's a new beginning for our heroes. But this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.